Welcome to WineFluence, your one-stop shop for exploring the rich world of wine, improving your wine knowledge, and, crucially, learning how to pick the perfect wine for you and your budget. I'm RJ, the wine guy, and I'm so very excited to welcome you to our very first episode. So guys, now I'm going to show you 2 wine advent calendars we'll be tasting through over each day of the month of December in the lead up to Christmas. So, ladies and gentlemen, here it is, the Laithwaite's 2025 wine advent calendar. As you can see, she is absolutely stunning. In particular, other than the joy of the artwork itself, I particularly enjoy 2 things. First of all, on the side, you can see whilst there aren't windows to open, which is probably sensible, there are in fact, there is a continued motif running both sides of the calendar, and they didn't have to do that, and I think that was extra cost to them, but I think they've actually done a really good job with that. It makes it look consummately well put together from an artistic perspective. And the second thing I really love about it is it has, well, when I received it, it has what I call reassuring, reliable heft to it. So it's not like extremely heavy, but obviously they have 24 bottles, one of which I think in the middle, spoiler alert, I think might be a full-size bottle. So it's not going to be super light, but it has that kind of like reassuring quality heft to it that you might associate with something that's been well engineered, well put together, and has had some time spent on it. So really appreciate that. When I compare it to, say, the Naked Wine advent calendar that I'll be showing in a moment, that's also great. But Naked Wine, have taken the decision to decant, I think, some of their producers' bottles into pouches, which is perfectly fine. It's not like a bladder bag. The wine does not come from bladder bags for the Naked Wine calendar, but it does keep it hermetically sealed. But I have to say, if I had to choose, and I'm not commenting on what is more environmentally friendly, because I'm not entirely certain of the two which would be more or less environmentally friendly, but I really do like the idea of opening a bottle every single day. Take from that what you will. It's only a small bottle, but I just quite like the sort of, I don't know, the joy of that. But, I won't prejudge the Naked Wine Advent Calendar. I'm sure it contains some fantastic wine, and functionally at the end of the day, ultimately it's the product quality that matters, right? The wine content itself. But there's nice little touches, and I just think this is a really adorable little scene. Actually reminds me quite a lot of some of the scenes I've seen on. We have some advent calendars, some wooden advent calendars from Fortnum's, which we've kept sort of as family heirlooms now for years, and it sort of reminds me of that. It's sort of a classic Christmas scene. So very much look forward to trying it, and in particular, you can see door number 1. Absolutely cannot wait to see what is behind that. Okay guys, here we go. Here it is. All 24 days laid out before us for this beautiful Laithwaite's Advent calendar. And I'm going to zoom in to day number 1. Here we go. Here she is. And we are going to open door number 1. Numéro 1. I'm very excited to see what's behind it. Ooh, a red top, interesting. And just take it out. Not too difficult to remove. Looks like a red. And what have we got here? Merlot. I mean, that reminds me of the infamous Merlot quote from the 2004 film Sideways with Paul Giamatti. But I don't share that opinion. I won't spoil it for you, but I think Merlot is absolutely fantastic. So this is Merlot. Very interesting. Okay. I'm going to have to do some reading on this because it doesn't give a huge amount away on the bottle. Now, obviously it's a screw cap, but you can completely understand that given the fact that it's a small bottle. What is it in terms of size? 187 milliliters. So it's sort of like a small to medium glass of wine, I would say. Probably on the higher end of small. But it does look good, I have to say. Really looking forward to trying that Merlot. Fantastic. Day 1, here we go. Okay, folks, so here we have Wine Advent Calendar number 2. This is the Naked Wine Advent Calendar. And whereas Laithwaite's is quite a big purveyor of wine, at least, in Europe, UK, I think they definitely have a presence in the US as well. I would say that Naked Wine definitely has grown a lot, but it's typically the kind of producer that sources on purpose, like smaller independent wine producers and growers. So it's quite interesting to compare the two. One is more Laithwaite's is perhaps the more established purveyor of wine, and Naked Wine is kind of more the sort of slight disruptor of wine. So I enjoy both, and they do different things as retailers. But let's have a look at this calendar. So it's definitely modern, right? So if you compare it, I'm just going to switch. That's the Laithwaite's one, sort of very Christmassy, very classic, very kind of homely. This is obviously much more compact, much more modern, and decent. I will confess I'm more of a kind of oldie-worldy person, but I do like it. It's clean, it's simple, and in a moment I'm going to open it up and show you what it looks like on the inside. So there we go. So it basically opens up a little bit like it's giving library, whereas the Laithwaite's one is giving more like individual advent calendar. This is an advent calendar, but it's more sort of giving library. And I think the main difference is Laithwaite's has the physical bottles of wine, and this is more sort of taken from a bottle of wine, condensed into a hermetically sealed bag. But it's simple, and I like it. It's as I said, it's a kind of bibliographic library. It's just kind of like, sequential. Like I'm going to be honest, despite being an oldie worldy kind of magic kind of person, what I like. Is it like there shouldn't be a charity for this? Like I don't want to over egg the pudding, but like first world problems times a million. But like when you're sort of like, oh, for God's sake, right? Where's 12? Like, oh. Ironically, there's 12, but you know what I mean. Like you're like, oh, for God's sake, like and you're like, there isn't a 12 here, Whereas here, it's so much simpler. It's just like bang there. So whilst I do prefer oldie worldy in general, and that is not a comment on the wine world because I think it depends on the wine. There's something elegant about this which I really enjoy. So we're going to have a look in a moment, see what the first bottle of wine is. Oh, and it says chill. Oh, I've just noticed this. Oh, this is so cool. Right, so it says chill for number 1, decant, chill, decant. I think that's all it says. It's either chill or decant, and it gives you the time of how long you have to decant it. So if it's chill, I'm guessing it's going to be a white wine or a rosé, or perhaps a dessert wine. Maybe even a champagne, but I don't think we're going to have any champagne because I don't think it would survive hermetic sealment. But anyway, we'll see. But that is interesting. I'm going to go and pop that in the fridge, and then I am going to come back. Guys, okay, I literally took it out and I was so excited I couldn't even pop it in the fridge just yet. I will go and pop it in the fridge, but I just have to show you this. So it comes out like this. This is number 1, and this is, as they call it, crisp white, dry, the iconic Picpoul de Pinet. Now, Picpoul de Pinet, just dropped it. I'm sure it's fine. This is why I can't have bottles. So Picpoul de Pinet is an absolutely very specific, fantastic wine that is traditionally made in France. I will tell you more about it, but I'm very excited. And it's quite bold, in my view, that their first wine is a Picpoul de Pinet, because it's not like, that well-known a grape varietal. It's not a Sauvignon Blanc, it's not a Chardonnay, that kind of thing. So very interested. And what I love, which you don't get in the Laithwaite's one, and it's fine because, horses for courses, is, as you can see, it has on the back of each of these little days a little thing, a little saying. So you versus December, you're cool, bright and prepped, just like this wine. And then it gives you a little description of the wine and what you might pair it with. And then a little QR code as well, in case you're interested in learning more about it. So gonna go and pop this in the fridge without dropping it again. Probably, maybe. Okay, let's face it, I probably will drop it. But I'm absolutely looking forward to this and will let you know everything about it, including how it tastes.
Guys, I have so much in depth content planned, going through individual grape varietals, different regions, and most importantly of all, tasting through a lot of truly excellent high quality wine. But to kick off our journey through the world of wine together, I thought it best, especially as 'tis the season, to commit to producing 24 wine tasting videos over the festive period, so the month of December. And what better way than to taste through not one, but two wine advent calendars from some of the biggest, most respected players within the industry, namely the 2025 Laithwaite's Wine Advent Calendar and the 2025 Naked Wine Advent Calendar. So, today we're going to be focusing on two different bottles of wine, one from Laithwaite's and one from the Naked Wine Advent Calendar. So, settle into your cozy Christmas mood, make yourselves comfortable, and join us as we dive into day one of our little wine tasting adventure. So, just to explain, we are using ISO tasting glasses. These are the international gold standard for wine tasting glasses. So specifically, you'll notice it has a tulip shape, by which I mean it is wider at the bottom and then narrows and tapers as we go to the top. The reason why that's good and why it's met the sort of international gold standard is because wider glasses at the bottom allow for better aeration of the wine. And as we know, as wine develops in a glass, as it gets into contact with air, particularly as we're swirling the wine in the glass, that can help open up the wine, open up and release the aroma, and also open up the palate of the wine, soften the tannins. I'll go into a little bit more as we're tasting. But essentially, as it then begins to taper at the top, unlike most wine glasses, which either keep a similar shape or get wider. Occasionally they narrow a bit, but not a huge amount. But as this particular glass narrows at the top and tapers, that essentially allows all the aroma to be concentrated. So when you stick your nose in like this, you're really getting all of that aroma, or the majority of it. It's not sort of disappearing into the atmosphere around you. You might not think that makes a huge difference, but let me tell you, in my experience, it really does. Now, I really don't advocate drinking all your wine in an ISO tasting class. I think if you're specifically tasting a wine, let's say you want to take the first sip of it before you serve it with friends or yourself or whoever, then maybe that's reasonable to do that. And if you're kind of like me and obsessed with wine, then it can be a very nice way to taste wine, particularly like higher quality wine as well, so you get the most from it. But, let's face it, like all of us, we're here just to enjoy and drink some decent wine, right? So I think there are glasses you can get that are like regular glasses that have the wide brim, that allow for the aeration and are slightly tapered, that will give you more of a nose of wine, but are still very practical because when you look at this glass, it's pretty small. In fact, it can double as a port glass, so you can actually have like quite a small amount of wine in it. So for everyday drinking, unless you want to be like super restrictive and like people who have those little tiny plates, or like Alan Sugar, Sir Alan Sugar, who reaches into his lapel and pulls out the world's tiniest fork to eat his meals with. Unless that's the plan, which if it is, more power to you. I would recommend using this as like wine tasting rather than every single day wine glasses. But obviously today we are doing a wine tasting, and so I wanted to give you the full experience, and I wanted to be able to give you the full report on the wine, not just sort of a vague impression. So, those are the ISO tasting glasses. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them most places that do wine glasses, and they're not particularly super expensive. Obviously, you can get more expensive crystal ones, but I think for daily drinking, absolutely fine. Just get yourself a set of these. So to begin with the Laithwaite's Day Wine, we have dun 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 the Merlot, and it's their 2023 vintage. Right, so almost dropped the bottle. Just having a look at this bottle. It's a beautiful little red bottle. You've got the name, which I will go into and explain the etymology of, and then obviously the grape variety is Merlot. It is a Spanish bottle of Merlot. Now, putting that to the side for 1 second, Merlot. Okay. Merlot is grown widely across many regions where wine is made, most notably perhaps France, Italy, and the west coast of the United States. But as I said, found in most places that are, wine is made, including as far flung as Australia. So, in terms of Merlot, Merlot is the kind of wine, in my experience, that is harder to get right. It's harder to find a good Merlot than perhaps it is some other grape varietals. There is a lot of average to bad Merlot, and there is a small amount of excellent Merlot. But to get like generally good Merlot, it does exist, but in my experience, it is rarer than some other grape varietals, but it's also responsible for some of the very best wine in the world. For example, the iconic Chateau Petrus, which is perhaps one of the most accoladed and highly considered bottles of wine on the planet. It's made since I think around 2010 with 100% Merlot, so nothing else, just pure Merlot. And even a modest 10-year-old bottle can set you back in the UK, approximately £6,000, so that's around €7,000. Maybe find it a little bit cheaper in France, but it's got such an international market, it's probably not much cheaper. And in the US, again, depends on where you're buying in the US, but broadly speaking, around $8,000. So this is not your everyday cheap bottle of wine. And if it is, kudos to you because you have made it big leagues if that is your everyday bottle of wine. But Merlot in this bottle, Merlot, is from Spain, and specifically the Cariñena region. And this is in the northeast of Spain, just next door to the also iconic Rioja region that is Spain, which I'm sure most people have heard of. So this region, Cariñena, is more known for a grape called Garnacha or Garnacha, in Spanish. Excuse my pronunciation. Or in French, Grenache. You've probably heard, or you may well have heard of it called Grenache or Grenache, because it's very commonly produced in France under that name. A very well respected region in general is for Grenache is the Cariñena region. So it's very interesting that we somehow have a Merlot from that particular region. Okay, so I did some research about this specific wine, the Merlot, because I wasn't familiar with Merlot. And according to Laithwaite's, the name is derived from blackbirds that basically are engaged in a daily struggle with the wine growers and the farmers in the region. So obviously the blackbirds, the Merlot, apparently sort of like regularly dive bomb and swoop in to essentially get access to and steal magpie like the ripe Merlot fruit off the vine, the grapes themselves, and so the farmers have to take care to kind of place defenses, maybe scarecrows, I'm not sure, to kind of prevent the best grapes being picked off by these sort of scavenger style birds that swoop down and try and steal the fruit. So it's interesting, to me at least, that they've named the entire bottle of wine after their most notable nemesis, which is the Merlot birds. Um, and just in terms of the wine cost, so it retails for £11.99. So let's say in dollars, maybe that's closer to $15. But it's currently on offer on the Laithwaite's website for £8.99. That would put it in the modest table wine price category. So just to say this right off the bat, I don't have very high expectations of this wine. It's not going to be a Petrus, obviously, like 0.1% of the price of Petrus, but my expectations to consider it a good bottle at this price point would be a good everyday table wine, something that could complement a particular dish or meal, something would either be representative of that wine style to a degree, or at least something well balanced but interesting in character. So I'm not sure I'm looking to compare this to a £50 bottle of wine. Let's just sort of get that out of the way to begin with. But before we go any further, just to say this is kind of slightly above the initial entry level price of wine. So I'm hoping it'll be a good table wine. Let's investigate. Let's get into the wine a little bit further. So, guys, let's begin. As ever, we begin first by examining the colour of the wine. So, as you can see from the beautiful colour, we have a sort of purple, but I would say it's more of a ruby, which is quite characteristic. I'm not sure if you can see into the wine glass as well, but characteristic of Merlot in particular. It has that kind of ruby, almost like a ruby port kind of colour, and it's so deep. It's gorgeous as a colour. I'm just going to swirl the wine to aerate it a little bit. I've literally just opened the bottle. I'm not going to decant this bottle. I'm not sure it's worth decanting such a small bottle, and for the price of well, a retail price of £11.99. I think it's debatable, but I think these wines are generally produced to be drunk quickly, and it's a 2023 vintage, so it has a couple of years on it. I'm just going to have a look at that wine colour again. It is beautiful. Okay, next, having identified the colour, we're going to go into the bouquet, which I think, frankly, is one of the most important things about a wine, because as we know, 70% of our taste is our sense of smell, our olfactory smell, the old schnoz. So without that, you might get something on the palate, but I really think that the bouquet and the nose of a wine is just as, if not in some ways, more important than its taste, but at least as important, let's say. So I'm swirling it around. As I noted, this is an ISO tasting glass, so it's tapered at the top. You can see it's kind of, wider at the base, and it sort of tapers up a bit like a Dutch tulip. And that enables the wine to be well aerated. But when I put my nose into the glass, unlike say a really thick glass or a really big wide rimmed glass, you're going to get a lot more of that aroma concentrated, and you're going to be able to smell it better. So let's have a nose. So I always like to go in for quite a few different sniffs of a wine. I think, you get one aroma, or a few aromas to begin with, but in the second, third, or fourth revisit, you get a little bit more. So on the first aroma, the immediate thing that I'm getting is a sense of jamminess, by which I mean if you were to open up, a decent bottle of, let's say, a decent jar of jam, let's say a Bon Maman jam or something like that, and you sort of open it and you stick your nose in, obviously not so much to be covered in jam, that has happened before, and also with wine, you get this kind of sweet, fruity kind of marriage, which I can only describe as jammy, in a way that kind of gives you that sort of sense of almost salivating anticipation that there's going to be something sweet and fruitful. So that's the initial scent I get. I'm going to go in for a second snifterino. So on the second scent, the jamminess is still very much there in the background. However, I'm getting something else. I'm getting a sense of a sort of after the rain forest floor. So the scent of post rain we tend to describe with the word petrichor. So if you imagine you sort of outside wherever you live and you're walking around, maybe it's somewhere where there's greenery, that sort of thing. Happens in cities as well, but perhaps a little bit easier to pick up in places with foliage and greenery. After the rain, there's this kind of mildewy scent, a sort of scent that, meteorologically speaking, something has broken, and a process of nature has happened. And that's what I'm picking up here. And I say specifically forest floor because there's something earthy, as you might expect from a Merlot, but there's something of almost a kind of a woodiness to it. So imagine kind of like that damp forest floor. I'm just going to confirm that. Definitely the jamminess combined with that sort of forest floor. But now that I'm going in for a third sniff, I'm sensing something else. So we've got the jamminess, we've got that kind of petrichor forest floor. That rhymes, didn't intend it to. And then below that, there's something else that's sweet but distinct from the jamminess. Do you know what it smells like? If you ever have a nice ripe plum, right? So you go to the supermarket or wherever you get your plums, you get a nice ripe plum, you cut it open, maybe you're cutting it into slices, and you just have that smell from the chopping board. But even if you lift it up to your nose, that kind of instant sort of plumminess, it's kind of simultaneously almost gives the impression, the anticipation that your mouth is going to be hydrated with the water content of the fruit, but also a delicate sweetness, nothing too overpowering, a kind of a fruity, almost vegetal sweetness to it. And I'm going to go in again and see if there's anything else I can detect. There's something on the finish. There's a spice. I'm just gonna say it's pepper. It's not particularly strong black pepper. I'd say it's more toward the white pepper spectrum. Sometimes I find that can be a little bit difficult to differentiate between what is the alcohol and what is the, because obviously the wine, most wine contains alcohol, and what is the pepperiness of it. What is the spice? But if I had to describe the scent of this wine as I swirl it, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I I think you can get some particularly reasonable wine for around, let's say, the £10 mark, which this kind of sits in. I think you can get some reasonably good wine, good table wine. But I'm impressed with Laithwaite's first day one, 1st of December offering. Let's see if the quality continues as I taste this and as we go through the 24 days. But so altogether on the bouquet, I'm getting jamminess. I'm getting that petrichor and the forest floor. I'm getting plum and a hint, but really a very mild hint of kind of what I think is white pepper. So, having aerated the wine a little bit, swirled it around the glass, having had the nose, having prepared my palate, I'm going to take the first sip. So, as you could see me there doing, it's not rude, it's how we have to drink wine and taste wine. I was aerating the wine around my mouth. And the first thing I'm trying to get is a feel for the body. How heavy is this in my mouth? Now, Merlot, as I said, is typically a medium bodied wine. I'm going to be honest, on the first taste, I'm actually getting higher end of light bodied, not sort of like extremely light bodied, but this is lighter bodied than most Merlot that I've had, and that's not unpleasant. I quite like a light bodied wine as well. So that's the first thing I'm getting. The second thing I'm getting is a scent, or sorry, a taste of the acidity. So how much, kind of like when you have lemon or lime or that kind of thing, how much do you start salivating? Do you have that kind of sourness in your mouth? I'm getting some acidity. Um, I'm not getting, an extreme amount of acidity, which is good. That's a good indication, I would say, particularly for a wine that's pretty young at 2023. That's reasonable. That shows a level of care and attention in terms of how the winemakers have made this wine. And the next thing I'm getting is a sense of the tannin. So the best way I can describe tannin, when you make a cup of tea, and apologies to those of us who are coming from, a different continent, but objectively, there is only one good way to make tea, and that's how the British make tea. I will die on a hill over that, but no microwaves involved. Anyway, that'll be a separate rant video. But however you make tea, you dip the tea bag in. The tea starts to brew, or you might use tea leaves. But either way, there's sometimes if you leave it too long, or when it's you haven't drunk it quickly enough, there'll be a bit of a film on the tea, kind of like a little like a resin of some kind, and that is tannin, right? So it's that kind of slightly earthy, coats your mouth, kind of. It provides a weight and a structure to wine. So my initial assessment is the tannins are quite pronounced in this wine. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but you would, when it goes up sort of the quality levels when it comes to red wine, broadly speaking, I would prefer to have a red wine that is its tannins are softer, bit deeper, more complex, less kind of immediately upfront. But yeah, that takes bottle aging, that takes a lot of quality and a lot of quality winemaking process. So I'm going to go in for a second sip. But this time I'm not going to sort of aerate or pull it as much. The tannin is still quite present, but I think what we've all come here for is what does the wine actually taste like? I'm definitely getting that fruitiness immediately on the mid palate. So the middle of the tongue, I'm getting a lot of fruitiness. I'm getting it's a red fruit and it's pleasant. I'm gonna have to try again and see exactly what fruit it is. I'm actually getting it's sort of a red fruit to start with, but I think the red fruit is more of a plum actually, rather than a blackberry or blackcurrant or that sort of thing or pomegranate. I'm very much getting plum, and actually that's a really good sign. It's a good sign that what it smells like is what it tastes like. It's not always the case, and a lot of the time it gives away more on the nose, but it needs time in barrel or aging in bottle even to give that same aroma or similar aromas, similar taste on the mouth. Or it can be the other way round, uh, where it's quite gentle on the nose, but it's suddenly very lively in the mouth. I would say this has a slightly more active nose than palate, but I think there is good follow through from the nose to the palate. So specifically, I quite like this wine. I have to say, it's light, it's gentle. It's definitely not something I would necessarily pair or serve with like a thick, heavy roast. I think you could absolutely get away with poultry for this. Maybe not pork. I'm not sure it has necessarily the weight and the acidity to hold up well to pork. But I think this is as dare I use this term, easy drinking red, the bane of the wine industry. Um, but that's not necessarily a bad thing in this case. I actually quite like it. I'm gonna go in for a final sniff. Yeah, I can see that development of the scent on the nose. It's perfectly pleasant. Perfectly pleasant. Laithwaites, you've done well. Um, so Merlot, reasonable, absolutely decent, table wine, I would say. It's not going to knock your socks off, but it doesn't have to. And for that price point, it also doesn't have to. I would happily enjoy this. And do you know what? I would happily enjoy this on a summer's afternoon or summer's evening, when those days are a little bit longer before the sun sets. Maybe you're out on your porch or your veranda or your garden or wherever you are. Um, and it is something I would easily share with friends. And if I was going to go on to a heavier red, I would start with this. It's impressed me, Merlot. Um, I think overall it's a reasonably high quality wine for the price point, and it is definitely a very good start, Laithwaite, to your first day 2025 wine advent calendar. I would recommend it. The overall vibe, I said that's my final taste, but come on, let's be charitable. I'm going to have one final taste. The overall vibe is this is a preparatory wine, right? So maybe I'm going out with the girls or the boys or whoever a little bit later, but I'm at home. I just want to kind of, I'm throwing off the trappings of work, whether I've worked from home or I've gone into commute in wherever I'm working. I'm back home. I just want to open something that's going to be reasonable, certainly not offensive, certainly something I can just mellow into at the end of the day. And this is she, a perfectly reasonable, Merlot with good follow through. Pretty impressed, particularly as the region itself is more known for Garnacha or Grenache, and particularly as it's coming up next to Rioja, the iconic Spanish wine region. I think this is very well selected. So, overall thoughts: good bottle of wine. I would probably buy the full bottle of wine. I might even gift it. And as long as one's expectations are this is a reasonable entry level wine, that is going to be quite good for a summer's afternoon, or maybe even paired with a poultry dish of some kind, like a chicken. Then I think job's a good and well done, Laithwaites. So, guys, here we have our second wine for December 1st, the first day of Advent. And it is a Picpoul the Pinet from Naked Wines. So, just to start off, Picpoul de Pinet is essentially a wine that is produced in the southeastern tip of France, in the area called the Languedoc-Roussillon, which is a Mediterranean kind of climate and Mediterranean part of the southern easternmost tip of the coast of France. So let's start with the name Picpoul. So this is derived from the old variant of French spoken in the region, which is otherwise known as the region of Occitanie. You might have heard of the brand L'Occitane or L'Occitane or L'Occitane, depending how you desire to pronounce it. They produce a lot of kind of skincare and shower gel and perfumes and fragrances, that kind of thing. That comes from the same region as the Languedoc-Roussillon, Occitanie. So in old Occitanie French, Picpoul means lip stinger or lip smacker. And boy howdy, does that variant earn its name? Okay, so this is not your sort of everyday grandma's wine. This is well, I don't know. Your grandmother might be like some intense kind of wine collector, but for many people, this is going to be a newer experience. It certainly was for me when I first tried it. So, the grape variety is Picpoul Blanc, and Blanc just means white in French. So, obviously, as you can see, it's a white wine, right? As you would expect. So, typically, I've not tasted it yet, but typically, Picpoul de Pinet is very fresh, very crisp, dry style of a white wine. As I said, it has a unique flavor profile in my view. It's actually a wine I personally discovered a little bit later into my initial journey into wine, when I started working in the industry 15 years ago. I'd already been working in the industry actually for a few years before I discovered it. Now, it is a little bit more common now to find on the shelves or in the wine retailers than it was 15 years ago in the UK. But even that said, with that context, you can imagine it gives you an impression that this is a rarer style, and how impressed I am that it's Naked Wine's opening salvo, their first shot, right? From the 2025 wine advent calendar, Naked Wine advent calendar. They could have put this as like day 7 and I'd still be pretty impressed, but day 1, that is a bold move. So it bespeaks of good things, or at least bold things, okay? So now the wine itself retails at $12.99. But if you're a wine angel, I'm going to put the wine down for a second. If you're a wine angel, this means you're a customer of Naked Wine that is signed up to pay monthly into an account a certain amount, acting as an investor for them. I think the minimum amount is £20 a month, so it's not like a huge investment. You save a certain amount of money on each wine. And this particular wine, you save one whole pound, which is like $1.30, right? So, some discounts at Naked Wine are much bigger than this. I've seen like 10, 15, £20, kind of discounts per bottle. But, you know, as that famous British supermarket says, every little bit helps, right? So you can pick a bottle of this Picpoul de Pinet up for £11.99, which is around like $15, $16. So very similar price point to the Milo Merlot that we had just recently. So diving down a little bit more into this particular Picpoul de Pinet, the producer is a gentleman by the name of Benjamin Darnaud, or Benjamin Darnaud. And there is, it's the 2024 vintage. So clearly a very young wine, but that is fine because Picpoul de Pinet is designed to be drunk young, right? It's not designed necessarily to be a wine that you age forever, right? So, okay, the reason I'm particularly impressed by this is is looking at the Naked Wine website itself. They have ratings on the wine, and like angels or customers basically taste the wine and they put a rating. 98% of nearly 1,400, so 1,400 people, which is pretty high even on their website for the amount of people that have tasted this, have rated it as good, and they've liked it, right? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. All my years in the wine industry, it is very rare that you will, of a sample size of that size, 1,400 people, get 98% of them to agree they liked it plus, right? That really does point to we might be about to try something pretty good, okay? Now, obviously, everyone has different tastes, and like you could hate a wine and it's great, or you could love a wine and it's not great, or like whatever. But I'm a very big believer in wine is very much your personal taste. Don't necessarily have to listen to someone else if they think it's a great wine or whatever. This is really just a journey we're taking together for you to sort of start to continue to open up your own experience in wine and make up your mind for yourself, right? But having said that, from an evidence based perspective view, pretty hard to ignore. Large sample size, 98% of people like it. That means it's doing something at least right, okay? So, um, on the site, it describes the producer, Benjamin Delnau. He's obviously French, but he worked as a wine grower in Australia, which is not uncommon. A lot of experienced French wine growers or who they've had it in their family go over to the New World, New Zealand, Australia, and help to kind of, help with the great production there as well. So he moved to Australia to do that, but he then moved back to France, and unfortunately, he initially struggled, as many wine growers did, during the financial crash, the recession, for those of us who are, young in the teeth long enough to remember it, of 2007, 2008. However, thanks to Naked Wines, angel investors, so their customers, he was able to realize his lifelong dream of launching his very own wine label with his name on it. So this is the Benjamin Darnaud Picpoul de Pinet 2024. And just before we begin, let me just say, Félicitations, Benjamin. So, congratulations, Benjamin. I raise a glass to you. We shall do it together, to have launched your very own wine label and to receive 98%, particularly in such a unique wine style as Picpoul de Pinet. Well done, sir. Well done. So, let's now, having spoken about it, do what we've all come here to do and smell, taste, and explore the wine a little bit further. Here we go. Okay, guys, let's dive right in. So, this is the Picpoul de Pinet, day 1, December 1st, from the Naked Wine Advent Calendar. Now, as I said, I'm very impressed that it's Picpoul de Pinet. So, the first thing we're going to do, as we do with every wine, is in our ISO tasting glass, we are going to examine the colour. So, if I tilt it up to the camera, it's quite a sort of, I would say, pale straw colour, but it does have a certain kind of lustrous gold quality to it as well. It's not kind of like pure pale straw. It's got a kind of ambery gold character to it as well. So I think that's quite interesting. It's definitely seems to have life, and as you can see, I'm swirling it around to aerate it a little bit better. Just while I aerate it, I will say, so the wine itself, because it's Naked Wine Advent Calendar, came in a pouch like this, which generally I'm fine with in terms of it being hermetically sealed, but gonna be honest, it was harder to pour than, let's say, in a bottle. Like, obviously, we had the Merlot in the bottle, much harder to pour, for me at least. And I'm sure that the more I open, the more the technique will become apparent to open these particular bags. But it might have been nice if they'd included a spout. So I slight digression. There's a very good olive oil company that I am raving about called Citizens of Soil. I will, maybe link them in the description, but they're incredible. And they have a monthly olive oil subscription that comes in like a pouch, and it has a really good spout. And I appreciate that it probably would have been quite costly to put 24 spouts in, but going to be honest, it's not necessarily giving premium compared to the Lathwaite's calendar. And just in terms of price point, both calendars cost £99, 99, so which is like £100, so it's like, I don't know what, $130 or something like that. So similar price points, similar amount of wine. In fact, I think the Lathwaite's one has probably got a large bottle um, of something for the 24th, whereas it looks to the Naked Wine calendar to simply be another similar sized bottle. And just in terms of portion size, I think you get quite a lot less. I'm just going to have a look. You get 125 ml, whereas in the Lathwaite's calendar, you get 187 ml. And as I said, I think they do a full size for Christmas Eve for the 24th. So that's aerated. I love that colour. Oh, God, that's so inviting. So as ever, let's stick our nose in, or my nose in, and let's have a snifterino. Oh God, I'm sorry, but I was gonna save this for the vibes, but that produces an emotional reaction in me. It feels like the joy of spring. That is the best way I can describe it. But it's such a bountiful, fragrant nose already. I can actually my this is more for the palate, but like literally the acidity, which you'd expect to be pretty high in a wine like this in Picpoul de Pinet, is so strong that already I'm salivating in a good way when I smell the wine. Oh, there's such a sort of peach pepperiness to it. So the initial on the nose notes that I'm picking up are like a ripe orange peach, not even white peach, like full on, full developed orange peach, but ripe. You can tell it's ripe because it's less vegetal and more fruit, and there's just a sort of a warmth and a sweetness to it, actually. And this serves in a really interesting, what they call contrapposto, so a sort of a juxtaposition between that sort of sweet peach and something completely different on the other side, which is a white pepper. And it is a white wine, but it's much more pronounced than it was in the Merlot Mellow. Remember, I noted one of the sort of vague, notes at the end was white pepper. This is really upfront. And in such good, it actually makes me want to grill a fully ripe peach, orange peach, and then put a little bit of white pepper on it, maybe with some olive oil from Citizens of Soil, and taste that because this is literally what it smells like. You can see why it's giving spring in a glass, right? Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit deeper. There might be some more. It's got that kind of. I'm smelling I'm smelling like the vine of a white grape, but I'm also smelling, well, like wood chips. Like wood chips that kind of like sort of yellowy brown kind of chips on the floor. With just like the faintest hint of hay. When you go to the countryside, if you don't live in the countryside, and you're kind of you're hit with a couple of smells. Let's be honest about the countryside, but one of the smells, the more pleasant smells that you're hit with immediately in a kind of country area during a certain time of the year is as the scent of hay, right? Particularly sort of springtime, like May, June, that kind of time, and it finishes with hay. So it starts with peach and white pepper. It moves down into a slightly kind of earthy wood chips, and it finishes off with this round hay. It's delightful. I'm very impressed, but I'm usually impressed by people. I've had some bad ones, but it's rare. Um, so having flirted with the wine, it's time to go to the next base, so to speak. So I'm gonna taste the peak pool. Bonjour. I second my congratulations. This is a fantastic wine, particularly for the price. Okay, so the body, surprisingly medium plus body. I don't want to be too technical, but if you imagine like the scale of body, like low, medium, full bodied, right? Whereas the Merlot, which is a red wine, more notes than that later, but which was a red wine, was more toward the light bodied end. This is more toward between the medium and full. It's not like super full. It's not like kind of a very oaky Californian Chardonnay or Merceau, which is like really chewy in your mouth. But it's actually fuller than a lot of people I've had before. So it's kind of more to the medium full, and it's delightful. I'm going in for a second. Yeah, definitely medium-ish, medium plus body. The acidity is absolutely there, but it's not as strong and punchy as some people I've had, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's actually a good thing. Um, it's definitely giving. I'll go on to the vibes in a minute. But it's definitely giving like springtime drink, which is interesting for a wine advent calendar. But I guess with a wine advent calendar, you want to have like quite a wide variety of wine that you're tasting, and not just like limited to Christmas or winter. Right. And now the third. I'm going to try and identify some of the flavors. I have them in mind, but I want to verify. Trust but verify, and enjoy wine. The immediate note I get on the palate. And you remember how I talked about follow through from nose to palate? A lot of the time with Picpoul de Pinet, it'll smell quite sweet but taste very dry. It's definitely dry, but I'm getting a lot of fruit. I'm actually getting that ripe peach, but I'm also getting a hint of mango, right? So, when you cut a mango open, or I don't mean to be a Philistine, but for those of us who live in the UK, you might have had an ice cream, maybe as a child, called a Solero ice cream, and that's like a vanilla ice cream pop, but it's got like a sort of a kind of a sorbet, like a mango sorbet around it. Um, it's giving fresh cut mango or that kind of Solero. Even when I'm putting the nose to my glass, it follows through, and when I taste it, it's that ripe, oh, beautifully ripe peach with that mango, and then it just has this beautiful finish of the white pepper. So intense follow through, as well as having this sort of dry citrusiness. The citrus is there, and I'm gonna say it's more toward the lime than the lemon. It has like a green citrusiness to it. This is a really well put together wine. I'm very impressed. Well done, Benjamin Darnaud. This is a very good People de Pinet, especially for the price. This is very reasonable. Um, okay, so overall vibes. It's just so delightful. It's supple. The word is supple. People, lip smacker, lip stinger, is usually extremely punchy. And listen, I'm gonna need some water after this because there's definitely that punch, but it's gentle and flirtatious with how it doesn't just slap you across the chops. It leans in. You can smell its aroma. It's sensual. But before delivering a little bit of a, the French might say la douleur exquise, the exquisite pain, of that kind of lip smacking citrusy note, but it's so youthful and peachy. This is perfect for a spring or summer's day. And just in terms of pairing, would strongly recommend if you eat seafood, seafood. The acidity would go very well with it. If you don't eat seafood, something with, that's creamy with a higher fat content, but needing that acidity to cut through. So maybe like a risotto would work very well, like a nice mushroom risotto or butternut squash risotto. That would pair very well with this kind of wine. But anything seafood, crustaceans, shellfish, salmon, whitefish, that kind of thing would go extremely well as well. Might actually want to make like the perfect dish would be like maybe a bouillabaisse, which is like a fish stew in France, but also like maybe like a kind of mussels marinated with garlic and shallots in a risotto with butternut squash, like, or mushrooms. Like, I think that would be like, we're talking perfect, like god tier level pairing. It's delightful, guys. I'm gonna say it. Benjamin Darnon, félicitations encore. It is a very good example of Picpoul de Pinet, and it has its punch, but in a slightly more restrained than you would expect way. And for 11.99, 12.99, this is punching well above its weight. To get a comparable white wine, I would pay double and be pleasantly surprised. I mean, I have to say, I will definitely be repurchasing this in the full bottle and probably several bottles and saved up to the spring. Um, this is a very well developed, well manufactured, well created and crafted wine, in my view. So overall thoughts, really good, very much worth the value, and the vibe is supple and flirtatious, yet youthful and spring driven. So, again, very much recommend this wine. Very impressed, Naked Wines. You have set a high bar for us to start with, okay? Impressed with Laithwaite's as well. They've also set a pretty high bar. But if I had to choose between the two, between the Picpoul de Pinet and the Milo Melo, Milo Melo is good and I was impressed with it, and it's reasonably good for the price. But this Picpoul, we're giving top marks to, in terms of what it is and the price point. So there we go. Do you remember how I said that wine develops in the glass? Well, I've had my lunch, and I have let this bit of Merlot from Milo Merlot, that's the Laithwaite's wine today, develop in the glass a little bit. And it has continued to have that good follow through from nose to palate. But the tannins have softened somewhat, as one might expect with a bit of aeration. Initially, as I said, they were quite punchy and strong, um, but they have softened. That has become quite a sultry wine. I think that is the right word. So she's giving sultry. She's giving like end of the day, end of work, kind of mellow down, as I said. But it's developed on me. I would say that I my initial impression was correct, but I do sometimes like to just come back and give you an extra little assessment, having had it kind of mellow in the glass a little bit. So the mellow has mellowed. Try saying that 10 times fast. So, guys, we've tasted two really quite interesting bottles of wine today. One, obviously, from the Laithwaite's Wine Advent Calendar, and one from the Naked Wine Advent Calendar. So, of the two, gun to head, if I had to pick, I would pick the Picpoul de Pinet by Benjamin Darnaud. I think it was an absolutely cracking little zinger of a Picpoul de Pinet. It had certain things that I was expecting from Picpoul, so the kind of the fresh acidity, the crispness, the quite strong bouquet, but it was also supple and just a little bit fuller bodied than I was expecting in the most pleasant way. But do you know what? You don't have to pick. They were both really good wine for the price point. I think the Picpoul de Pinet was an excellent wine for the price point, and the Merlot was a reasonably good wine for the price point as well. We'll definitely be purchasing the Picpoul de Pinet. The Merlot, I'm gonna let my let me get this right. Millo, mellow, mellow, one more day, and just see how it opens up a little bit. I did enjoy it, and I probably will purchase it, but I'm less rushing out the door to purchase it and more thinking, well, that's a reasonable choice. So let's see how it goes. I'll have a sip on day two, and if it's just as good or better, we'll definitely be buying it from Laceways. So thank you very much for sharing this wine with me as we continued our exploration into rich world of wine together. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up, share and subscribe, hitting the bell icon to not miss a beat in our little Christmas adventure together. It really does help the channel and make all the difference. If you have any comments or questions, please pop them in the comments section below and I'll be sure to get back to you. Have a winefully wonderful day, folks.